From the post-millennial, 30 million Americans say violence is justified to keep Trump from power. University of Chicago study. The U Chicago professor said the public is more radicalized, and that's really quite significant. Okay, but well, before we opine on this, let me read and break this down because we got to be careful here. They say the study found that 11.6% of U.S. adults agree that a use of force is permissible to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president. This amounts to around 30 million people. But hold on there. A total of 3,543 U.S. adults were polled for the survey in June of 2023, with a reported margin of error of 2 to 3 percentage points. University of Chicago professor Robert Pape, who led the research, said that while he believes recent indictments against President Trump have created radicalization, there is also growing anger and radicalization on the left as well. Oh, gee, you think? The public is more radicalized than it was in April, and it's really quite significant. We've been tracking this quite a while, and this is really a big bump. What Pape did not mention is that the number of people who would approve of violence when it serves a desired political outcome on the left dwarfs that of the right. In the same study, it was determined that the amount of Americans who say the use of force is justified to return Trump to the White House has shot up from 6 million in the past few months to about 18 million. It's almost half the amount of people who justify using violence to keep Trump out of office. So right now, when it comes to radicalization, I don't know if this actually means 30 million Americans. It translates to perhaps.
No.
These studies are done in such a way that they have successfully, in many instances, extrapolated data to a great degree. The only question is margin of error. They say 2 to 3%. Maybe it's 5 to 10, 10 to 20. Let's say the margin of error is 10 to 20%. You think that would be fair, Ian?
It's tough to tell. It's impossible to tell. That's the problem with this article, and it's disgusting that they wrote that headline. That
Why?
is complete mislead because they only polled 3,500 people.
But do you know how polls work?
Yeah.
How do they work?
You get a small group of people, and then you ask them a question or a group of questions, and then you can do whatever you want with that.
So the way
data.
it works is they have charts tracking various demographics. They poll the demographics in key areas. They figure out what the majority of these areas think and feel. Then they do a wider sample size with different questions and say, if the Cast Castle household, 100% of this house, everyone polled in it said they would not vote for Joe Biden. Some might vote Libertarian, some might vote Trump, but 0 for Biden. When they do a larger poll and they say, we called this house and we were told that they don't think violence is justified, they extrapolate that with a margin of error to say previous polls in the area based on demographic views and studies have shown that this group tends to vote this way. When we asked them, they said this. They then target a bunch of different areas and say, this 3,500 people is actually a very large sample size for a poll. I think it's fair to say, however, the margin of error could be way larger, and to just immediately say 30 million Americans say, no, we've extrapolated that data point. But it does suggest, a study suggests 30 million Americans believe violence is justified. It doesn't mean they will commit the violence, however, just that someone else could.
I think
if they were put on a jury, they would be like, oh, we sympathize with what you did.
Either way, I think it is absolutely fair to say this is patently obvious when you talk to these people and when you see people go and do men on the street interviews with them. They absolutely agree with this in major cities.
Oh, in a lot of places, definitely. I just think that they should have done it by percentage, like this percentage of people versus 30 million, because that makes it sound like there's exactly 30 million out here that are ready to go to war. Right
yeah,
now.
could say,
and it also says that the study says that 30 million people said it. I mean, this is completely misleading, disgusting.
10%. It could say 10% of 11.6% of poll respondents said that violence was justified to stop
the word
Donald
millions
Trump.
in all caps too. It's such clickbait.
Inconsequential number either. Like that's a big percentage.
That's
like that in
our good
itself
friends over at the Post Millennial.
I have great friends at Post Millennial. That is disgusting, you guys.
30 million Americans did not say this. That's very, very different. But there is a study that says 11.6% of those who responded said they would. I don't think the study just went to an Antifa enclave or went to a DNC meeting and said, how do you feel? I think they did a standard, study. Let me, what do we have? Political crisis. It's from July. Where do they explain?
Can you go to the study? Does it link to it?
It just links to a news article. Do we have this actually? University of Chicago.
Because if they link to the actual study,
Nope.
sometimes that's...
Anger and radicalization. Rising number of Americans say political violence is justified. Survey shows a small but significant share of Americans believe in the use of force to attain political goals on both the left and the right. It's funny, they don't mention that the study shows that on the right, it's half of what the left wants. So this is from about 2.5 weeks ago. And let's see, do they have the study here? Dangers Project has been conducting Dangers to Democracy. Now they just linked to another one of their own stories.
Also, if it Dangers to Democracy survey sounds like a pretty biased way of like, we're in danger. You need to get ready, get going.
Well,
like,
Danger to Democracy is a left biased title because Republicans, conservatives, libertarians don't call the United States a democracy because it's not.
Yeah, like, would you fight if you were in danger? Is
So
a lot bigger question. Would you fight? You know, adding the danger part of it is like, well, if I'm in danger, I'm going to be a lot more likely to fight for my life.
So here's how it should actually break down. If this was framed that way and it's skewed liberal in their survey questions, that means that of that 11.6, there's a massive bias, so the number is probably much less among both groups. In fact, you could argue if it was left biased, then the political violence to support Trump would be a lot lower. You ask a liberal, do you think violence should be used to put Trump in office? They say no. Do you think violence should be used to stop Trump? They say yes. If you poll 2,000 Democrats and 1,000 Republicans, you will get the numbers you're looking for. That's the important thing to track with these studies. But here's what I want to get to. I don't know if this is true. All right, it may be. 1 in 5 Americans believe that the election is stolen. These polls are not always accurate. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Some of the, but what have they been off by? Like 7 to 10%? Let's just say the number is 7 to 10%. Let's track all of the polling that we've seen thus far in the past 2 elections from. Let's just take a look at 2020 and 2022, the presidential and then the midterms. The polling, actually 2016. Let's look at from 2016 till now. The polling has been consistently off by between 7 or 10%. So that means we're looking at 20 million people in this country would hold those sentiments if the polling was off by that much. And it could be in the other direction. It could even be higher. It could be 40 million people who believe in the use of force and violence.
But when it comes to plaintively telling humans how many people want to fight to kill right now, we should be very specific about who claimed that. Like, it was only 3,500 people that made those claims. So I do not want to extrapolate.
It was 360
people of 3,500 people polled. So it was very, 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 very tiny.
And now considering that, and considering the polls have been wrong by about 7 to 10% in favor of Trump, I think it stands to reason that the number is probably a bit less than 30 million. And we can argue that the 11.6% number is probably, if we were to drop it down, it's probably closer to 9%.
And
that's a high removal, because I was saying just 10%, but that's nearly 20% being removed from that number,
and people
from 11 to 9. But so that then we'd be looking at what, 15 to 20 million people who want to engage in violence?
Except that a lot of people that answer polls to begin with are people that are politically activated. And those are the people that would be more likely to, in a situation, take up arms, I think, or people who are already aware of what's going on.
Let's say the amount of people that want to engage in, that are willing to engage in violence is 5 million. Let's say it's 2.5 million. Or three. Let's just say 1/10 of what they actually got.
1/10 of 1%.
3 million people. I think when you look at the Summer of Love, it's clear to see that there are millions of people prepared to engage in violence.
Offensive violence? I don't know.
They did it.
Yeah, I mean,
Hundreds of thousands of people all over the country? I mean, how many people... I know that during Occupy Wall Street, they said there were 300,000 at its peak had protested in some capacity. But this ranges from actually sleeping in a park to marching down the street a couple times. Mm-hmm. When it came to the Summer of Love riots, how many people actively rioted? What do you think? 50 to 100,000? Because it was all over the country. Mm-hmm. There had to be hundreds in every city, even small towns.
And there were multiple nights. I mean, it wasn't just one riot and then we call it a day.
Yeah, 50 to 100,000. I don't know. What I can tell you is, we had talked about this a long time ago. The amount of people required to destabilize this country and kick off some really crazy stuff, it's like a couple dozen.
Well, and we already know violent crime is up in every major city across the country. We know that we are seeing violence on a more regular basis than we have in years past. So it wouldn't be surprising to me that people would then say, like, if I feel politically motivated, I would also be willing to act violently. That's a simple conclusion to draw. I don't know what the number on that would be. It just seems like people feel more unrest and are willing to act out on that than ever before.
What I think is interesting, I feel like there's a lot of violent people in the country, but to be like purposefully violent is kind of a different thing, right? Like if you look at remember when Kai Cenat had that thing, that's his name, right?
Yeah,
and that bunch of people
the
started just
PlayStation
rioting.
giveaway.
Yeah, and everybody started going crazy.
I
like,
think that proves it, to be completely honest.
that it could happen. Yeah, I feel
Not that we're on the cusp of it. When people are willing to be violent and destructive for no reason. You know, we talk about civil war and they're like, who's really going to fight? I don't know, a random guy who's bored, because we've seen that happen over and over and over again in the past couple of years. People just being like, it's on, I guess. They lose control and they go and smash stuff. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.